Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The first shot took out the Meridian's starboard engine before anyone knew they were being watched. No warning, no demand to halt. Just a lance of directed energy that punched through the engine housing like a needle through wet paper. And then the ship was spinning, and Cadwell was already on the comm shouting for damage control before the alarm even finished its first cycle. The Meridian wasn't a warship. None of them were. They were part of an evacuation convoy, moving civilians out of contested systems towards Sector 9, the closest secure zone still holding. All ships, break formation, evasive pattern delta. Now. The Ardent and the Cova-Ren responded immediately, peeling away from the Meridian's flanks, thrusters burning hard. It bought them 3 seconds before the second volley came. 6 ships materialized out of the debris field like they had grown from the rock itself. No running lights, no identification signatures. They had been sitting cold and dark among the asteroids, engines off, waiting. The free spatial zone had always been considered safe, the shortest route to Sector 9, and until now, free of conflict. The Meridian took a second hit along the port side. Lieutenant Simon Cadwell grabbed the edge of his command console as the deck lurched. Somewhere behind him, something exploded, with a sound like a building falling. He didn't look. There was nothing to look at that would help. Below decks, a civilian section took the hit directly. The hull didn't rupture cleanly. It tore open under pressure, the fracture spreading faster than the ship could compensate. The compartment depressurized instantly. There was no time to seal it. Air went first, then everything that wasn't secured. People followed. Emergency bulkheads deployed. One failed to close fully, leaving a narrow gap that kept feeding the breach. The system flagged the section as contained. It wasn't. On the Meridian's internal display, the compartment flickered, and then vanished. Weapons. Give me a firing solution on the lead ship. Sir, we have 3 locks competing for targeting priority. Pick one. Fire. The Meridian's forward cannons opened up. 2 of the shots went wide. One connected, scoring a bright scar across the hull of the nearest Cracor vessel. The ship didn't slow. It adjusted course by half a degree and kept coming, and Cadwell understood in that instant that he had not hurt it. He had scratched it. The Ardent was firing now too, short controlled bursts, and the Cova-Ren was angling hard to bring its broadside to bear. For 30 seconds, the free spatial zone was lit up like something alive, energy trails crossing in every direction, debris catching fire and spinning away into the dark. It looked like a battle. It was a slaughter with extra steps. A Cracor vessel twice the Ardent's size pulled alongside her and matched velocity exactly. Cadwell watched it happen on his display, and his stomach dropped. Ardent. Break off. Break off right now. Too late. Magnetic clamps fired across the gap. The impact registered through the hull sensors, a deep mechanical thud that Cadwell felt in his back teeth. Then the cutting torches started. The Cracor didn't bother with boarding tubes or docking protocols. They cut through the hull directly. Fast. Practiced. Cadwell. It was Lieutenant Hess on the Ardent. We've got breach on deck 3. Armed boarders. Estimate 12, maybe more. Can you seal the deck? Negative. They cut through the seal points first. Fight them, Cadwell said. Slow them down. Keep them off the civilian decks. The channel stayed open. He heard it. Gunfire, human and alien both. The screaming and the crash of close-quarters combat in the tight corridors of a ship never designed for it. He heard voices he recognized giving orders, and then those same voices going silent. He kept his eyes on his own tactical display, and did not look away because there was nothing he could do for the Ardent except survive long enough to matter. The Kovaren got its broadside shot. It was a good shot. 3 direct hits on a Krekor vessel that was still trying to maneuver, and the third hit caught something important because the Krekor ship shuddered and began venting atmosphere in a long white plume. The crew of the Kovaren cheered on the open channel. Cadwell heard it. The Krekor ship did not retreat. The plume continued streaming from the breach, fire crawling along the hole where the hit had landed, but it kept firing. 2 more Krekor vessels moved to bracket the Kovaren. Cadwell watched the geometry close like a trap snapping shut, and there was no move he could call that would stop it. All ships, concentrated fire on the vessel trailing the Kovaren. Everything we have. The Meridian and the Kovaren both opened up simultaneously. For a moment it worked. The trailing Krekor ship took sustained fire and pulled back. Hull breached in 2 places, one of its weapon arrays going dark. The gap opened. Cadwell started to breathe. Then the Meridian's primary power coupling failed. The strain of running every system at maximum output for 11 straight minutes was too much. Worn before the war, and driven hard ever since. The lights on the bridge dropped to emergency red. Half the console screens went dark. The forward cannons stopped mid-cycle. Silence on the Meridian that felt like falling. "Backup power," Cadwell said. "Backup is already what we were running on, sir." He looked at his tactical display, the one screen still functioning, and saw the geometry clearly. The Ardent had stopped maneuvering. The sounds on its channel had changed. He could hear Krekor now, a language like gravel and hissing, rapid and sharp, and the sound of humans being moved, restrained, the particular noise of people who have stopped fighting because there is no longer a choice. The Kovaren was still firing, still fighting. But the 2 Krekor vessels had it flanked, and a third was moving to cut off its escape vector. Cadwell ran the numbers without needing a computer. He had been doing this for 12 years. "Kovaren, this is Cadwell. Cease fire." A pause. Then, "Sir?" "Cease fire. All weapons down. Do not give them a reason." Another pause. Longer. He could hear what it cost the Kovaren's commander to say the next word. "Understood." The shooting stopped. The free spatial zone went quiet. In the stillness, debris from the engagement drifted. Twisted metal, shattered sensor arrays, fragments torn from hull and structure. The Krekor ships held their positions, just sitting in the dark, watching with the patience of things that had all the time in the world. The first boarding party hit the Meridian 7 minutes later. They came through the hull the same way they had hit the Ardent, cutting torches through the sections they had already identified as structurally vulnerable from the outside. Cadwell had his sidearm out, and 4 crew members with rifles forming a line in the corridor outside the bridge. He knew it was theater. He did it anyway. The first Krekor through the breach was larger than he expected, at least 2.5 meters, body dense with muscle under scaled hide that ran from dark green along the spine to pale yellow at the throat. Eyes set wide and flat, pupils vertical, catching the red emergency lighting and throwing it back cold. It moved with its upper body low and its arms slightly spread, and it stopped when it saw the humans with weapons, and it did not flinch. It was still. Completely still. Cadwell understood the body language without needing a translator. This is not a threat. This is an evaluation. It was looking at them the way someone looks at an item they are considering purchasing. 3 more Krekor came through behind it, then 4 more. Cadwell held the line for 6 seconds. Then he lowered his weapon. Not because he was afraid, because 4 rifles against 8 boarders in a corridor, with more coming behind them, was not a last stand. It was a waste. "Tell your people to stand down," he said to the first Krekor, not knowing if it understood him. "We're not fighting anymore." The Krakor looked at him for a moment. Then it made a sound, short, sharp, directed backward, and two of the ones behind it moved forward with restraints. Not rope, not wire. Something that looked almost organic. Thick bands that locked with a click that sounded very final. They worked quickly, and without cruelty, and without care. Both things at once. The crew of the Meridian were restrained and moved aft. Cadwell last. He walked without being pushed. In the hours that followed, the Krakor methodically stripped both the Ardent and the Kova Ren of their people. Of the 3,500 civilians aboard, only 3,200 remained, held in the cargo holds of the Krakor vessels. Cadwell watched what he could from where they held him. Cataloging. The Krakor communicated in short bursts of sound. Their hierarchy showed in how they moved around each other, the smaller ones stepping aside, the larger ones pausing to assess before acting. Status expressed through stillness and space. At one point, a Krakor officer, Cadwell assumed officer, it had a different pattern of scales along its jaw, and the others deferred to it without being told, walked the length of the Meridian's cargo bay examining the human equipment stacked there. It picked up a rifle, turned it over, set it down. It made a sound that another Krakor answered with a short, dismissive click. They left it there. Left all of it. The ships, the equipment, everything. Too primitive to bother. They were moving the last of the captives when Cadwell got his chance. 30 seconds, maybe less, when the two Krakor assigned to him turned their backs to force the remaining captives into a line. He saw the emergency recorder panel, the small manual unit bolted to the bulkhead at shoulder height, the one that captured and transmitted on a frequency so old and low priority that no one jammed it because no one thought it mattered. He hit record. He talked fast. Attack timeline, Krakor ship configuration and count, the way they moved, the way they communicated, the way they organized their hierarchy, the scale patterns on the officer, the fact that they had left the ships because they considered human technology beneath salvage value. Everything. His voice was level. His hands felt distant from him. Carter, if you're getting this, we're already gone. Understand the enemy. Use the zone. They think this place is worthless. He paused. Use it against them. The Krakor yanked him away from the panel 30 seconds later. One of them struck the main display, shattering it and killing the section in a single motion. The recorder bolted beside it remained intact. They didn't notice that it wasn't part of the system they were dismantling. The Krakor ships pulled away from the debris field in tight formation, engines burning hot and fast toward open space. Behind them, 3 human ships drifted silent among the rocks, lights still on emergency red, bodies still in the corridors, equipment still in the cargo bays, the recorder still running, transmitting on its low and ancient frequency into the dark. The free spatial zone went quiet again. It stayed quiet for 19 hours. Commander Lloyd Carter's ship dropped out of FTL at the edge of the zone and immediately went to combat stations, because that was standard protocol in unknown space, and because Mace Oren had looked at the long-range sensors and said nothing, which meant what the long-range sensors were showing was bad enough that Oren had decided not to say it out loud. Carter looked for himself. 3 ships, drifting. One still burning along the hull, where internal atmosphere continued to feed the fire. No movement, no active transponders, no response on any frequency. "Take us in slow," Carter said. They went in slow. The picture got worse as they closed the distance. Debris, frozen atmosphere venting from hull breaches, and the bodies, which told its own story. Most of the dead had been left inside. Most of the living had been taken. Carter stood at the forward viewport and looked at the Meridian. "Pull the ship recorder," he said. Everything it has. It took Oren 10 minutes to establish the link and pull the full data package. The recorder had captured it all, from the first shot to the moment the Krakor ships disappeared from sensor range. Carter watched the relevant portions in silence. The ambush, the fight, the boarding. He watched Cadwell manage an impossible situation with everything available to him, and then watched the situation stop being manageable. He watched 3,200 people get loaded into Krakor cargo holds. He watched the Krakor officer pick up the rifle and put it down. Then he watched Cadwell record the transmission. He watched it twice. When it finished the second time, he remained where he was, looking at the frozen last frame. Cadwell's face, calm, already being pulled away from the recorder by a scaled hand entering the frame from the right. "Oren," Carter said. "Sir." "How many ships do we have in range that we can call without pulling them from active combat duty?" Oren was quiet for 3 seconds. 7. Maybe 9 if we pull the 2 on picket duty at the Kova relay. "Pull them. That leaves the relay exposed." "I know." Oren started making calls. Carter looked back at the viewport, at the drifting hulks, at the rocks and the dark and the debris field that the Galactic Council had declared legally meaningless and strategically worthless and entirely beneath their concern. He thought about 3,200 people in chains. He thought about what Cadwell had said. "Use the zone." "Drunk," he said without turning around. Raphael Drunk was already there, standing 2 meters back, having said nothing since they arrived. "Sir, start pulling everything from those ships that we can use. Weapons, materials, anything structural. If it's not bolted down and the bolt won't come out in 10 minutes, leave it. We're not here to salvage." "Understood. What are we here to do?" Carter turned from the viewport. "We're here to make sure they never use this place again. The Meridian was dead, but her bones were useful." Drunk's Marines worked in vacuum suits, cutting torches burning white in the dark, pulling everything that could be pulled from all 3 hulks. Weapon mounts, sensor arrays, conduit runs. 2 intact torpedo tubes from the Kova Ren that had survived the battle because they were aft, and the Krakor had hit forward first. It took 4 hours, and the work was ugly, and none of it was done gently because there was no time to be gentle. Carter watched the debris field while they worked. Oren stood beside him at the long-range display, pulling trajectory data from the recorder and cross-checking it against fragmented contact logs and outer zone incident reports. Most of it was incomplete, unverified. But patterns were starting to line up. "They call them Krakor," Oren said. "Name shows up in a few reports from fringe sectors. Nothing consistent. Ships go missing. Crews disappear. No formal classification." Carter didn't look away from the field. "Pirates," he said. "More organized than pirates," Oren replied. "They don't just hit ships. They take people. Move them." He shifted the display, overlaying the approach and exit vectors across the debris field. "They use places like that as cover. Come in cold and dark, drift with the field until they're close enough to strike. Then they're gone before anyone can track them." Carter studied the pattern, the geometry, the silence between the rocks. Behind them, half the fleet was still tied up on evacuation routes, systems collapsing one after another as the war with the Sethar pushed deeper into human space. Every safe corridor mattered now, every shortcut. And this one had teeth. "We're not giving it back," Carter said. "So we hide in the rocks?" Oren asked. "We hide in the rocks." Carter looked at the field. Thousands of asteroids ranging from the size of a ground vehicle to the size of a city block, drifting in slow ancient orbits, close enough together in sections that a ship running without lights could sit between them and be invisible to any scan not specifically looking for it. The Krakor had used it as a hunting blind, Carter intended to use it as a fortress wall. "Get the salvaged arrays mounted on the 3 largest rocks in the inner belt," he said. "Passive only. Nothing that transmits. I want eyes without a signature. That gives us coverage on the main approach vector. And the secondary?" Oren pointed at 2 positions on the display. "Here and here. We put 2 of our ships cold and dark. Engines off, systems minimal. They look like debris until something comes close enough." "Then they stop looking like debris." Carter nodded. "It wasn't optimal. It didn't need to be. Optimal was for people with better odds." They had the zone configured in 6 hours. Carter's 7 ships disappeared into the rock, and the dark and the quiet descended again over the free spatial zone. The same quiet as before, the same dead stars and drifting debris and absolute absence of anything worth caring about. Except now the rocks had eyes. And teeth. The Krakor transport came through 11 hours later. It was running at standard transit speed, no evasive pattern, navigation lights on. This was empty space. Lawless, worthless, empty space. The transport was mid-sized, built for cargo over speed, with a weapon loadout that was adequate for discouraging unarmed vessels and nothing more. It was exactly what it appeared to be. A ship doing a routine run through a route it had used before without incident. Oren's voice came low, and even over the command channel. "Single vessel. Matches Krakor transport configuration from the recorder. Running standard. No escorts." Carter looked at the display. The transport's course would take it through the inner belt. Through the teeth. "Drunk." "Ready," Drunk said. He was already in the forward airlock of his ship with 12 Marines in full kit behind him. Had been for 2 hours. "Take it clean. I want the crew neutralized and the cargo holds open in under 10 minutes. "Understood." 2 of Carter's ships came out of the dark simultaneously, engines firing from 0 to full in the span of a breath, closing the distance before the transport's crew had time to process what they were seeing. A 3rd ship cut off the escape vector from the opposite side. The transport got 1 transmission out, a short burst on a Krakor frequency, probably an alarm, probably automated, before Oren killed its communications array with a single precision shot that took out the antenna cluster without touching anything else. Clean. Fast. Total. The transport was still trying to bring its weapons to bear when the magnetic clamps hit. Drunk's team was through the hull in 4 minutes. 11 Krakor were aboard. Not soldiers, but crew. They carried sidearms and used them. It made no difference. The corridor fighting lasted 6 minutes. Then it was over. Carter waited. Drunk's voice came back flat and controlled, the way it always was. "Cargo holds open, sir. You need to come see this." "How many?" "Around 300. There." A pause that lasted exactly 1 second. "You need to come see this." Carter went. They were not from Cadwell's fleet. That was the first thing Carter confirmed, moving through the cargo hold with a medical officer beside him and Drunk 2 steps back. Not all of them were human. He saw it in fragments as he moved, differences in physiology, skin tones that weren't human, limb structures that didn't match any baseline Terran form. Some close enough to pass at a distance, others not. These were not the 3,200 from the evacuation convoy. This was a separate group, taken from somewhere else, processed and packaged for market. They had been in the hold for longer. It showed. He spent 4 minutes in the hold. He said the things that needed to be said. "You are safe. We are human. You are getting out." And he meant every word. And then he went back to the corridor, and he stood with his back against the bulkhead for a moment, while the medical teams moved past him. Drunk was there, not looking at him, looking at the wall opposite. "They were already sold," Drunk said. "Tags on them, Krakor inventory markers. Whoever bought them was going to collect them at the next waypoint." Carter said nothing. "There are more," Drunk said. "The navigation logs on this ship, Orin pulled them. Same route, multiple vessels, staggered schedule. They're running slaves through this zone in batches." "How many more?" "Rough count from the manifest fragments. Around 2,000. Spread across however many ships. We don't have exact numbers or exact locations." Carter looked at the ceiling. 2,000 people in Krakor cargo holds, moving through the zone on a schedule, and he had 7 ships and a debris field and salvage equipment, and the specific advantage of being something the Krakor had not yet accounted for. An enemy that hunted back. "Get the 300 onto our ships," he said. "Split them across the fleet so no single vessel is overcrowded. Feed them. Get medical on everyone." "And the transport?" Carter looked at the Krakor vessel. Clean hull, working engines, a navigation system that knew every waypoint on the route. "We're keeping it," he said. The Krakor commander's name, as best as human linguistics could render it, was something like Vraski. He commanded from a vessel 3 times the size of anything in Carter's fleet, and he had been running slave routes through the free spatial zone for 4 years without incident, and the silence from the transport did not frighten him. It irritated him. He sat in his command chair, low, wide, built for a body that preferred to crouch, and he listened to the report from his second, a younger male whose scale pattern was still darkening toward the deep green of full maturity. The transport had missed its check signal. Its last transmission had been a burst alarm, probably a malfunction. The zone had interference pockets that occasionally disrupted automated signals. Probably. Vraski was still for a long time. Around him his crew moved carefully, because stillness in a commander of his rank meant thought, and interrupting thought was the kind of error that ended careers in the specific sense of ending the person who made them. Prey did not hunt. This was not a philosophical position. It was an observed fact. Prey was prey because it lacked the particular combination of organization, aggression, and indifference to cost that defined a predator. He sent 6 ships, not because he was concerned, because loose ends were inefficient, and Vraski had not maintained his position by tolerating inefficiency. "Find the transport," he told his second. "Report the moment you do." The nearest ships were reassigned without regard for what they carried. He did not watch his ships leave. He turned back to his own business. Orin saw the 6 ships coming 40 minutes before they arrived. 6 vessels, combat configuration. Inbound on the primary vector, he said. Carter looked at what he had. 7 ships, 2 of them lightly armed. The salvaged torpedo tubes, now mounted on a modified frame on one of the larger asteroids, jury-rigged and untested. The passive sensor array on the rocks, the darkness and the geometry of the debris field, which he understood now better than he had 6 hours ago. And the transport. He looked at the transport for a brief moment. Drunk. "Sir, how many of your Marines have 0 flight experience?" A pause. "All of them, sir." "How many can learn the basics of a Krakor helm in 30 minutes? A longer pause. "I'll find out." It turned out Corporal Yates had grown up on a cargo hauler and understood helm mechanics the way some people understand language, not as a skill, but as a reflex. 32 minutes after Carter asked the question, Yates was at the controls of the captured Krakor transport with Drunk, beside him, and 4 Marines in Krakor crew positions they had identified from the ship's layout schematics, wearing everything they could find aboard that might read as Krakor from a distance on a camera feed. It was not a good disguise, but it just needed to be good enough for long enough at the right moment. "They're going to want a response signal," Orin said. "Can we fake it?" "For about 90 seconds before the pattern repetition gives it away." 90 seconds is enough. Carter laid out the plan. The transport would intercept the incoming force, broadcasting the correct identification signal, posing as the missing vessel returning with a reported malfunction. The Kraycor ships, not expecting resistance, would close to standard docking distance. At that range, Carter's ships would come out of the dark from 3 sides simultaneously. Drunk's Marines would board directly from the transport, ship to ship, using the proximity to their advantage. They would move fast, hold by hold, clearing each vessel and opening the cargo bays. "What if one of them runs?" Oren said. "We chase it. And if they—" "We deal with what happens when it happens," Carter said. "We don't have the information to plan for everything. So we plan for the things we know, and we move." Oren nodded. Understood. The transport moved out of the debris field and into open space, broadcasting its signal, running its navigation lights, looking exactly like a Kraycor vessel that had been delayed and was slightly annoyed about it. The 6 incoming ships saw it, adjusted course to intercept, closed the distance. At 80 seconds into the signal loop, 10 seconds before the pattern would have repeated and given them away, Carter's ships came out of the dark. What followed was fast and brutal, and not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a series of collisions, boardings, and very short, violent engagements in very tight spaces. Drunk's team hit the first ship before its crew had finished processing what they were seeing. Carter's 2 fastest ships ran down a Kraycor vessel that broke for open space and caught it before it cleared the debris field. Oren coordinated the sensor picture and called targets, and Carter moved pieces, and for 14 minutes, the free spatial zone was chaos, contained just barely within the shape of a plan. 4 ships taken. 1 badly damaged, but salvageable. 1, the 6th, the one that had been running tail end of the formation and had the most time to process what was happening, did not run. Its captain made a different choice. Carter saw it on the display. The 6th ship had gone still, not maneuvering, not transmitting, just still, in the way the Kraycor went still when they were thinking. Carter was watching it, and already starting to say something to Oren when the ship's power signature spiked, every system running to maximum in a single instant. And then the display went white. When it cleared, there was debris where the 6th ship had been. Carter stared at it. "Drunk," he said. "The 6th ship. Did your teams reach it?" Drunk's voice came back slower than usual. "Negative. We hadn't gotten to it yet. We were on 3 and 4. Was it on the manifest? Did it show cargo?" The silence lasted long enough that Carter already knew. "Pulling the manifest fragments now," Oren said. His voice was careful in a way that meant he was managing something. "Sir, the 6th vessel. It was carrying. The fragment is incomplete, but the estimate is—" Another pause. "Approximately 200 humans." The channel was quiet. Carter looked at the white space on his display where the 6th ship had been. He thought about the plan he had made, and the information he had made it with, and the gap between those 2 things, where 200 people had been and were not anymore. He did not move for a moment. Then, how many recovered across the other 5 ships? Oren ran the numbers. Preliminary count, around 800, maybe more. Medical teams are still going through. 800 alive, 200 gone. The math did not balance, and it never would. "Sir," Oren said quietly, "you didn't know." "No," Carter said. "I didn't." He turned from the display. "Get the recovered onto our ships. Get Drunk's teams back. We're not done." "There's something else, sir," Oren said. "From the recovered ships, we missed it on the first pass." Carter had already started to turn away when he stopped. "What?" "One of the cargo manifests. I cross-referenced it with the Meridian's recorder data." A pause, just long enough to matter. "Sir, I think we found them." Carter looked at Oren. Oren brought the data up on the display. "Confirm." Multiple entries match Cadwell's convoy. Identifiers, partial crew logs. Not all of them, but enough. Oren hesitated. They're alive. Or they were when this ship logged them. The display shifted. One of the captured vessels highlighted. Carter looked at it and asked, "Which ship?" "The fourth ship we took. Drunk's team cleared it second." Carter waited a moment. "Get me confirmation." "Already in progress." Carter didn't look away from the display. "Oren, broadcast it wide. Any ship that can carry people. I want them here. Now." Vrasky came himself. The Krokor commander had stopped sending pieces of his force and had decided to end the problem personally, with everything he had left. 14 ships. Vrasky's flagship at the center, larger than anything Carter had faced yet, flanked by vessels that were not transports, not scouts, not mid-tier anything. These were warships. Oren put the sensor picture on the main display and said nothing else. Carter looked at it for 10 seconds. "How long until they reach the inner belt?" 2 hours at current speed. Carter nodded once. "Then we have 2 hours." Oren shifted slightly at the console, bringing up a secondary track. "There's more. Civilian traffic responding to our signal. Transports. 1 medical ship. They're close enough to reach us before the Krokor does if they push their engines." "Bring them in," Carter said. "Keep them behind the inner belt. Nothing gets through to them." Oren was already moving, routing vectors, adjusting approach lanes through the debris. "Assign 2 ships to escort," Carter added. "They stay with the transports until they're clear." Drunk was already there. The transports came in fast and hard, engines running beyond their tolerances as they cut through the outer edge of the debris field under escort. They were not built for this kind of space, not built for this kind of risk, and it showed in the way they handled the approach. Slight corrections, minor drift, the kind of imperfections that would have been unacceptable in a warship and didn't matter here. They took people anyway. Cargo bays opened, and the movement started immediately. There was no clean system for it. Marines moved through the holds and corridors without speaking, carrying those who couldn't walk, directing those who could, pushing the flow toward open hatches as fast as it would go. The worst cases went first, the ones who wouldn't survive another hour if they stayed where they were. Carter didn't watch the transfer directly. He watched the timer and the incoming formation on Oren's display, tracking distance, speed, and angle as the Krokor ships moved through the outer belt with the same steady confidence they had shown every time they had crossed this space. "Status," he said. 70% loaded, Oren replied. "They're pushing capacity. Keep them moving." Time compressed the way it always did when there wasn't enough of it. The transports filled faster than they should have, crews taking risks that would have been unacceptable anywhere else because the alternative was leaving people behind. The escort ships held position just outside the inner belt, screening the approach and keeping the evacuation corridor clear. "They're clear," Oren said finally. "All civilian vessels are out of the belt." Carter let the breath out slowly. "Bring the escorts back in." The 2 escort ships slid back into formation without a word. The 4 captured Krokor vessels drifted near the inner edge of the belt, human crews aboard, Yates coordinating between them on a Krokor channel, simplifying commands down to the minimum required to move, to hold position, to fire when told. They were not Krokor ships anymore. "They'll manage," Oren said. "They don't need to manage," Carter replied. "They need to be in the way." He looked at the display again. 14 ships closing. "Get Drunk ready." Drunk was already moving. The zone looked the same as it always had. Dead stars, drifting rock, the absolute silence of space that had no strategic value and no legal standing and no reason for anyone to care about it. Except now, The zone was no longer empty. The torpedo tubes were already in position, locked onto the approach vector. Oren's passive arrays tracked every movement through the belt without broadcasting a signal, and Carter's ships sat cold and dark between the rocks, waiting. The captured Krakor vessels held near the inner edge, human crews aboard. Yates kept them aligned on a Krakor channel, reducing every command to the minimum required to move and fire. It was not a fleet. It was a mechanism, built from salvage and captured equipment and the specific knowledge of how the Krakor moved through this particular piece of space, knowledge Carter had extracted from their own navigation logs and used against them. Drunk's Marines were distributed across 9 separate positions, 3 teams on the captured Krakor vessels, 2 teams on Carter's fastest ships, suited and ready for immediate boarding action, 4 teams in sealed compartments on 4 separate asteroids, anchored to the rock with magnetic boots, waiting in vacuum with no engines and no heat signature, and nothing to distinguish them from debris, except that they were alive and armed and had been waiting patiently for an hour and a half. Carter had given Drunk exactly one instruction for the flagship: get to the cargo holds first. Drunk had not asked why. He already knew. "They're entering the outer belt," Oren said. Carter watched the formation move through the outer belt on his display. "The formation is tight," Oren said. "Tighter than standard. He's protecting the flagship. He's cautious." "Not enough," Carter said. "Let them reach the marker." The marker was a specific point in the inner belt, where the debris field narrowed between 2 large asteroid clusters, creating a corridor approximately 3 kilometers wide. It was the most efficient path through the belt. The Krakor had used it every time, according to the navigation logs. There was no reason not to use it. It was the fastest line through. Carter had turned it into the worst place in the zone to be. Vrasky's formation reached the marker. "Now," Carter said. The torpedo tubes fired. 4 torpedoes crossed the distance in 4.2 seconds. The Krakor formation was tight enough that the spread pattern caught 3 ships simultaneously. 2 of them took direct hits that breached their hulls catastrophically. The third took a proximity detonation that killed its engines and sent it spinning into the asteroid cluster on its port side. The explosion lit up the corridor in a white flash that lasted long enough for Oren's arrays to capture every detail of the formation's response. They broke. Not in panic. The Krakor were not a panicking species. But they broke formation. Ships peeling away from the kill zone, which was exactly what Carter needed them to do because the positions they were breaking toward were not empty. Carter's 5 ships came out of the dark from 3 directions. The 4 captured Krakor vessels came from a 4th. Vrasky's formation had entered the belt as a unified force. Now it was 11 ships, 2 destroyed, 1 disabled, trying to reform under fire in a debris field that had just demonstrated it was not empty, against an enemy that knew the geometry better than they did, because they had built the geometry specifically for this moment. The next 8 minutes were the most violent the free spatial zone had ever seen. Carter's ships were outgunned individually against Krakor warships, but they were not fighting individually. They were fighting as a coordinated system, each ship's position chosen to force the Krakor into firing solutions that put their own vessels in the crossfire. Oren called adjustments every 30 seconds, tracking the shifting geometry of the fight, and Carter acted on the information without hesitation because he had learned in 12 years of fighting a war that hesitation was just a slower way to die. 3 more Krakor vessels went dark. 2 of Carter's ships took serious damage, one losing its weapons array entirely, the other venting atmosphere from a hull breach that the crew sealed from inside while continuing to fly. The math was brutal, and it was working. Vrasky's flagship had not moved. It sat at the center of the contracting formation, returning fire, absorbing hits on hull plating that was significantly thicker than anything else in the engagement. It was not a fast ship. It was a ship built to survive, and Vrasky was surviving, watching his force diminish around him, and Carter could see on his display that the flagship's behavior had changed. It had stopped trying to maneuver toward Carter's ships. It was holding position. "He's protecting something," Oren said. "The captives," Carter said. "He still has captives aboard. If he's going to—" Drunk. Carter was already on the channel. "The flagship, now! Don't wait for the outer ships to clear. Go now." Drunk's voice came back immediately. "Already moving." Drunk had been watching the flagship since the engagement started. He had 2 teams, 8 Marines total, on the fastest of the captured Krakor vessels, and the moment Carter called it, they were already burning hard toward the flagship's port side, the side with the least weapon coverage based on the engagement geometry. The captured Krakor ship broadcasting Krakor identification codes right up until the moment it didn't matter anymore. The flagship's point defense systems opened up at 400 meters. The captured vessel took 3 hits. The 4th would have killed the engine, but Yates dropped them below the flagship's ventral plane in a maneuver that should not have worked with that ship's thrust ratio, and somehow did. And then they were in the flagship's blind spot, the narrow cone directly below the keel, where the weapon coverage overlapped wrong, and the magnetic clamps fired. Drunk was through the hull in 3 minutes. The flagship's interior was different from the transport's. Wider corridors, better lighting. The walls had markings on them, Krakor script, but also something that looked like tallies. Drunk didn't stop to count them. His team split at the first junction. 4 Marines toward the cargo holds, 4 with Drunk toward the command center. That was where Vrasky would be. The flagship's crew fought. These were not transport workers with sidearms. These were soldiers, and they knew their ship, and the corridor fighting was bad in the way that corridor fighting is always bad. Close and loud, and decided in fractions of seconds by margins that have nothing to do with strategy. Drunk lost Corporal Hain at the second junction, a shot that came from an angle nobody had the time to cover. He kept moving. There was nothing else to do. The cargo hold team reached the holds in 4 minutes and 40 seconds. What they found was approximately 600 humans, all alive. The hold was sealed from outside and hadn't been touched. Vrasky had not yet done what Carter feared he would do. Not yet. Drunk reached the command center door. It was sealed. He put a breaching charge on it and stood to the side and detonated it and went through the smoke before it cleared. Vrasky was there. He was standing at the center of the room, not in his command chair, not moving. 4 of his crew were still at their stations. 2 more were positioned between Vrasky and the door, armed. Drunk shot the 2 between them before they finished raising their weapons. His Marines took the 4 at the stations simultaneously. It was over in 4 seconds. Vrasky had not moved, had not reached for a weapon, had not spoken. He looked at Drunk the way the Krakor always looked at humans. The evaluation, the assessment of something that was not quite what it was supposed to be. Drunk crossed the room and put his sidearm against the console that the flagship's self-destruct ran through and fired twice, destroying the interface entirely. Then he looked at Vrasky. Vrasky was still for a long moment. Then he made a sound. Not the sharp command bursts Drunk had heard from other Krakor. Something slower. Something that the translator on Drunk's collar processed after a 3-second lag and rendered imperfectly as, "You are not prey." "No," Drunk said. He restrained Vrasky's wrists with the same bands the Krakor used on humans. The Marines had taken enough of them to start carrying their own. He walked him out of the command center at gunpoint. Outside, the engagement was ending. Without the flagship's coordination, the remaining Krakor vessels lost coherence. 3 attempted to run, and Carter's ships ran them down in the debris field before they cleared the belt. 2 powered down and went still. Surrender, or the Krakor equivalent of it. One fought until it didn't have the systems left to fight with, and then it drifted. The free spatial zone went quiet for the third time. But this time, the quiet was different. They spent 6 hours accounting for everyone. They found them across the captured ships, pulled from holds, moved through corridors, transferred in controlled waves to whatever space could take them. Humans first, others after. No one left where they were found. Cadwell was among those taken from the flagship, alive, stabilized by the time they brought him out. Not all of his people had made it. The captives from the flagship were in the worst condition. They had been aboard longest. Carter walked the recovery operation without speaking. Medical teams moved through the captured ships, and his crew handled the logistics of moving that many people across that many vessels. The number that wasn't there, the ones lost when the 6th ship had destroyed itself, sat behind every count like something that refused to be ignored. When the accounting was done, Carter went back to his command deck and opened a channel to the Galactic Council relay station at the edge of the sector. It took 9 minutes to connect. When the council representative appeared on screen, a species Carter had dealt with before, bureaucratic and precise, the representative began speaking immediately. Commander Carter, the Galactic Council has been monitoring the situation in the free spatial zone, and we must register our formal concern regarding the unsanctioned military engagement conducted within Article 7, Carter said. The representative stopped. Article 7 of the Council's own Free Spatial Zone Declaration, Carter said. Ratified 14 years ago. Any zone declared free and legally null by the Council falls outside Council jurisdiction entirely. No laws apply. No authority applies. The zone is, in the Council's own words, without stand.